So we had to take it from both sides. One, you had to pay attention to the customer and what their needs were. And then we had to talk to our own salespeople about, all right, how are you going to be positioned as a thought leader, as a seller, in order to be the natural, obvious, trusted choice in helping somebody solve their problems?
Welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast, hosted by Bernie Borges. This is the podcast for the modern marketer who wants to hear from their peers in the trenches and the occasional analyst or rockstar influencer sharing strategies and tactics about what's working in modern marketing. Be sure to listen to the end of each episode for Bernie's summary and takeaways so you can plan your next move in your own modern marketing journey.
Hey there, welcome to episode 256 of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. I'm Bernie Borges, CMO of Vengreso, and your host. Hey, thanks for listening. My guest on this episode is Stephen Handmaker, Chief Marketing Officer at Assurance. Stephen, welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Thank you for having me, Bernie.
Absolutely. I'm interested in our topic today because you've been in marketing for quite some time. You've been with Assurance for, I guess it's been 15 years, right? Is that right?
Yeah, it's hard to believe.
Okay. And I don't think you were CMO 15 years ago. So what I'd like to do is have a conversation with you about what you've seen evolve over the 15 years that you've been in marketing at Assurance and in a leadership role. But before we get into that, let's begin with where I always like to begin, and that is, tell us a little bit about the company Assurance and, of course, your role there, Stephen.
Terrific. Well, Assurance, we are an insurance brokerage. We are a commercial brokerage. We service some 6,000 clients across the country. Those are primarily mid-sized businesses, though I suppose we have a number of clients that would fall into the larger company category, and we probably have some 1,500 that you'd consider small businesses as well. There's also your handful of personal individual clients that we service, and we do all things insurance. It's everything from a business's property and casualty insurance needs to their employee benefits. We extend out into 401k programs, sort of a full service financial service operation.
So I don't think I would offend you if I said, there's not a whole lot that's sexy about that, but boy, is it necessary. I mean, every business on the planet needs all of that, right?
Yeah, I found it's a tremendous job security. Is pick an industry that everyone is absolutely forced to buy and can't be in business without. It's a good place to be.
Yep. Okay. So your role there currently, of course, is CMO, but you didn't always start out as CMO. So why don't you just tell us a little bit of your background, your history there?
Yeah, sure. It probably makes sense to at least just note that, so I have been in marketing for some 27 years now, and I was always in and around the insurance industry. So for the 12 or so years that I did marketing before I got to Assurance, I spent some time on the insurance carrier side, the third-party administrator side, the brokerage side. So I had been doing marketing of the insurance space for some 12 years before I got to Assurance. I joined the company at the end of 2004. And at the time, we were a reasonably, I'll call us a small brokerage. We had some 120 employees. I was the first, I suppose, real marketing professional that the company had ever hired.
Okay.
But the company had big growth plans and knew that this was an area in which they needed to gear up. So this was one thing that I took on with this company, and we've been growing ever since.
Okay, cool. So, Stephen, I want to be clear. Your company Assurance is primarily, perhaps even almost exclusively, but correct me if I'm wrong, business to business, right? You work with other businesses.
You got it right. That is our bread and butter. We are a B2B company, and we have a team of sales folks who go out and make those B2B sales.
Okay, terrific. So let's talk about the 15 years that you've been just at Assurance alone. And as you pointed out, 27 years in marketing, but in a marketing leadership capacity. what have you seen evolve? How have things changed over the last 15 years? And feel free to come as close to where we are today as you want to. But let's start with, what's one key thing you want to start with?
Well, I tell you, it's funny. When I joined the firm, my CEO was very clear on how, in his mind, he's like, I've got the first 10 years mapped out for you here. And I thought, well, that's an intriguing proposition. Tell me how my next 10 years are going to go. And he said, well, the first 5 years, what we'll probably do is focus primarily on brand building. And we want to get this firm really sure of who we are and how we want to be perceived and how we want to be marketed within our space. And he said, and if you can help me really focus for the first bit of time that you're here on building our corporate brand, we'll be in a pretty good shape. He said, but then the next 5 years, I'm hoping we can turn our attention to what we really need to do to arm our salespeople. And in my space, we call them brokers. So my salespeople are brokers in my insurance space. How do we help better arm our brokers to go about their new business prospecting efforts? So I thought, well, sounds like a plan. Let's get started. And amazingly, as a timeline would have you, it worked out about like that, where we really did focus on brand for the first 5 years. And we decided who we wanted to be and how we wanted to be known. As it turns out, we sort of developed a bit of a best place to work strategy, and we wanted to be the destination of choice for the top insurance people to want to come work because we had the best workplace culture and environment. And that is something that we decidedly set out to do. It was a space that certainly at the time was untaken, if you will, in my industry by anybody who was really thinking of such things. We were aiming to be the Google, if you will, of the insurance space in terms of being recognized as a great workplace culture. And so we went about that process, and it was good. But the interesting thing, and maybe this is to your point, we got to the place where it was time to start thinking about how we were really going to help our salespeople in all their tactical work to identify and attract and really sell to new businesses. And by the time we got there, the year was, call it 2010. And we were coming up on an age where everything I had known about marketing was rapidly changing. And what it was, particularly in B2B sales, where the salespeople really controlled the process of selling. They would go out and have to meet with somebody and have to, for the first time, really provide information on who the company was and feel like they're telling somebody something that they couldn't have otherwise known. All of a sudden, that was being flipped around because the buyers had unbelievable access to information about our company, our products, our services, our reputation, thanks to the magic of the World Wide Web and search. And so all of a sudden, we had to take a real look at how it was we were going to go about this effort of helping and arming our salespeople in a way that we were unused to.
So, Stephen, I'm curious, if the first 5 years, give or take, were focused on building the brand of the company, Assurance, did you and your team, and I'm even wondering if your CEO, get the light bulb that says, we need to now be thinking about building the brand of our individual brokers, because if the buyer now is in control, then the individual brokers are the ones that have to engage with them, and they need the brand to be strong and credible.
It's like you're reading my mind. That is a big part of the light bulb that we were dealing with. We recognize that, as you know, people buy from people, right? They don't just buy from companies. And as they're getting all this unbelievable access to information, they're also learning very closely about who they're buying from. And this is the dawn of LinkedIn, if you will. This is the dawn of people being out there with their own blogs and profiles and online reputations, that all of a sudden we recognized as we were going to attack this, we'd have to attack it in a much different way than we used to.
Okay.
I was going to say the one other thing I'd add to there is that the buying cycle, if you will, in that whole process was being flipped around, because normally you'd start to work with somebody, our salespeople would, and it was, you were getting somebody early on. But now so much of that work was being done by the buyer in advance of ever even talking to the company or talking to a salesperson. So we had to recognize that we were making that introduction at a very different place in the sales cycle. And so a lot of it went into strategy around how were we going to build our people in order to take advantage of that.
Okay, so then in addition to just the salespeople, did you also broaden your thinking around the employees at large, or did you limit that strategy to the client-facing salespeople?
I'll tell you, it came later. So we got there, but we were focused on sales at first. It wasn't until, we'll call it 4 years ago, 5 years ago, that we really started to become keenly aware that it wasn't just our salespeople all of a sudden who were out there, but our employees further needed to be those brand ambassadors, and they needed to be armed in much the same way. So where we are today is we have taken a full-scale look at our organization on the whole, and really do see every employee, no matter what their role here is, in something of a sales capacity. You're all brand ambassadors today.
Yep, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about what a lot of people call social selling. And at Vengreso, you may or may not know this about us, Stephen, we broaden the term, the concept, the principle, the practice, and we call it digital selling because we don't consider it limited to just social media per se, even though it's a big part of it for sure. And B2B, of course, LinkedIn is a huge part of that. We all know that. But give my listeners some insight into your approach. How did you guys approach that as you were focused on helping your brokers develop their brand? What aspect of it involves social selling and your strategy there?
Boy, this is it's a big topic. So we've done a number of things, and I'll just take them in chunks here. So for one, we became keenly aware that our clients, our prospective clients, the audience at large that was out there, was routinely giving us digital signals. And we couldn't believe, how cheap and easy it was to find that out. When we got into this way back when, I remember when websites used to promote and really care about, oh my God, we had 100,000 website visits today. What became obvious during the course of our journey was that who cares how many, it wasn't the 100,000 visits that you got, but what was more interesting was the ability to know instinctively and intuitively that we got a visit from, call it John Smith, CEO of this company, and here were the 8 things that John Smith read about today. Here was what John Smith was interested in. And it turned around the ability of our people to be able to react individually to the specific pains and needs that we were finding out there among our audience. So it changed the conversation. It flipped the conversation. And when we began identifying all these pains, we would want our salespeople to be built up online in their profiles as solution solvers of the big issues that were out there facing our marketplace. So we had to take it from both sides. One, you had to pay attention to the customer and what their needs were. And then we had to talk to our own salespeople about, all right, how are you going to be positioned as a thought leader, as a seller, in order to be the natural, obvious, trusted choice in helping somebody solve their problems?
Yeah, we frequently cite a statistic that you may be familiar with, Stephen. It's from LinkedIn's 2018 State of Sales Report, published in October of last year. I do not believe that they've published the same report for 2019 yet. But in that report, they state, among other things, that 62% of decision makers look for an informed LinkedIn profile when considering talking to a representative. An informed LinkedIn profile. And it's in the context of, it's in a section of the report that talks about the importance of trust. So in other words, what they're saying in that report, Stephen, is that the buyer is out there doing their homework, not just in the company, but the individual. And can this individual help me? Can I learn enough on their profile to understand that they understand my problem and they have solutions that might be able to help me?
100% could not agree with that more. And to take it one step further, they want to be with a salesperson that is clearly, constantly, and routinely thinking out loud, right? They want to hear, they want to see, they want to believe that there is somebody who understands their industry, who understands their pain, and who is regularly talking about and staying on top of the latest and greatest solutions that are there. So I 100% believe that the profile is the key place it starts. But they also, we believe that these buyers will look at, what are you regularly posting? What is it you're talking about? So more than just the profile itself, they want to dig in and believe that you are somebody who is consistently coming up with solutions.
Absolutely. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of my conversation with Stephen Handmaker. We've surveyed 862 B2B sales reps across 5 industries to measure their digital selling skills. The results? Despite the digital age that we live and work in, most sales professionals lack the basic skills to find, engage, and connect on LinkedIn with people that they need to meet to start more sales conversations. Get the Vengreso State of Digital Selling with LinkedIn 2019 report to learn how sales professionals stack up on requisite modern selling skills. You'll also learn how you can arrange to get your own custom digital selling benchmark report for your sales team. To get the State of Digital Selling with LinkedIn 2019 report, go to stateofdigitalselling.com. What about, it sounds like you're very, very close to sales. Love that. We cover that a lot here on the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. And clearly it's a trend that we've been seeing in recent years of marketing and sales being closer, marketing and sales being joined at the hip. I've had several guests just in the last 10 episodes alone that speak to that. Maybe you can elaborate on that. And I think you've been speaking to it already, but maybe if you want to unpack it a little bit more in terms of your alignment with sales.
Here at Assurance, I absolutely think it's more than alignment. I see my job as sales. That is what marketing is to me. And so we're no longer the make it pretty people, right? Marketing has to be the folks who are lockstep with the sales force in order to help them and arm them push new business across the finish line. So I consider that job one. Job 2, 3, and 4 that fall after that is everything perhaps that marketing used to be thought of as. Still important, but it is all about selling.
So as it relates to what we were just discussing a moment ago in terms of salespeople being credible on their LinkedIn profile and how they conduct themselves on social and LinkedIn in particular, what are some of the things that you've seen evolve in your marketing leadership role to contribute to their success?
One thing we know is that there's an online and naturally there is still an offline component. So I do believe that 100%. I'd like to think, certainly in my space where people are making multi-million dollar decisions about the expenses of their organization's insurance, there is the need and the ability to make a personal connection. There's as far as digital will take you and will continue to carry you. And then there is still the need to be able to converse, to meet, and to get to the buyers where they are. And the world of cold calling, if you will, which is increasingly obsolete, in my belief, you need a way in which to get to somebody. Now, digitally, that enables quite a bit, but we still really encourage our people to make sure they're living online and offline in the space in which their buyers are interacting. So we look at it a little bit, I hate the word, but we'll call it holistically, if you will, that in order to be successful, you have to have a well-rounded strategy. And so one of the things we do is, while we arm our people, we have I have a social media coordinator on staff who trains and educates and is a routine partner to our folks from a day-to-day standpoint. We certainly spend just as much time talking about, their online and offline activities.
Okay. And have you seen the evolution of marketing change from the standpoint of what's expected of you? I love, and I wrote this down, it's probably a tweetable comment for the show notes. You're no longer the make it pretty people. So what other aspects of marketing have you seen evolved in the 15 years that you've been in the marketing leadership role at Assurance? What are some of the other things that you've seen more recently?
You kind of talked to it. I imagine you and your organization must live and breathe this notion. But we are educators in many respects. We are trainers, if you will. Marketing has to take a leadership role in identifying ways in which to help our salespeople take advantage of all these amazing tools and functionality and things that are out there. Because quite frankly, many of them, that is not how they're wired. I have some tremendously talented salespeople where if you were to break down, if you will, their Myers-Briggs capabilities and all the other things that make them special and amazing at what they are, some of the tactical, tried and true digital work that we know works and needs to happen is not what they were trained to do, is not where their strong skill sets lie. And they need support and help and education in order to help them take advantage of those things. So in many ways, among the things that marketing has become is we become, internal educators on how to not just, let sales training be the job of sales. Sales training is now equally the job of marketing.
Yeah, I love that. And that is so true. I'm reminded of an episode about 10 or a dozen episodes ago, the head of marketing and the head of sales for a manufacturing company. And full disclosure, they're a client, and they recognized that their world was changing. The people that they were selling to were no longer in one specific function. They were selling to a lot younger person, and that person was more digitally engaged, more digitally savvy, and their sales team hasn't really been kind of keeping up. So they recognized that. They made the investment in what we call a LinkedIn profile makeover program and really helping the sales team understand how to engage that quote unquote modern buyer.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you've seen any of that yourself in, the insurance industry. Of course, you've been around for a long, long time. And have you seen any brokers, the people that you call salespeople, maybe adopt slowly? And how have you addressed that if you've seen that?
I've seen it. I'm living it. And I'll tell you what, here's the thing. It is like anything, I don't want to say we're at a tipping point. We've been tipping over for a long time now. But there's a wide range of brokers. There's certainly a wide range of buyers. So like I say, I have a number of folks who sometimes just need to get educated, and that goes a long way. And sometimes they need to see it in action. I think about the fact that we work in a lot of different industries. That's one thing. Many insurance brokers specialize in an industry or two. The size of our company, we specialize in, you name the number of industries. It's a lot.
Yeah, I noticed that on your website. I saw a dozen industries.
You got it. And many of them are what you would consider older fashioned, more blue collar, whatever the industry is. But you can no longer look at that and assume that, well, just because maybe it's a blue collar or a manufacturing or a construction industry, we do a lot in the senior living space. Forget that. The owner of that company, the people who are in the decision making, they're all on LinkedIn. They're all carry their iPhone in their pocket. They're all reading websites and blogs. I mean, it's not like they're not digitally engaged. Of course they are. So I think some of it is erasing some of what are obvious misconceptions out there and understanding that, that if you want to find your buyers where they're spending time, the reality is they're spending time online. They're spending time digitally. And that is a place you have to be, and you have to be smart about how they're going to see you there because they will. I like to say the world is not going to stop and start turning around backwards. We're in full speed ahead.
Yeah, exactly. We refer to that individual that you described, Stephen, as the modern buyer, regardless of the industry, regardless of the title on their business card. If you're selling to them, whatever their role or function is, they're a buyer in the context of your conversations with them. But it's the modern buyer, right? Like you said, they're all on LinkedIn. They've got a smartphone in their pocket, and they use it. And we say that the modern buyer needs a modern seller, right? Meaning that buyer is not going to engage with someone who's not a modern seller who can meet their needs and engage with them the way that they want to engage and need to engage. So I'm hearing that really throughout this conversation and sort of that transformation that you've been experiencing at Assurance. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I just take you one step further, which is that modern buyer nowadays has an expectation of speed. And they have an expectation as a modern buyer that response times have to be faster. If you're ever like me and you've sent somebody a text or an email or what have you, then you have it in mind that I'm not going to wait 24 hours to hear back from you. You have an expectation now that the person on the other end of that communication has to be reasonably, quote unquote, always on. And you need to be prepared and ready to deal with that because somebody else will be quicker on the trigger if you are not going to be.
Yeah. And I'll take that a step further, Stephen. And we use the phrase Omni-Channel, meaning, maybe I don't get a response from you via email that I'm looking to get, right away, but maybe I find your cell phone and I send you a quick text and say, hey, does Thursday at 3:00 work like we had discussed the other day? Because you didn't reply to my email. And then if I notice that you reply to my text, now I know that about you, that you're text savvy. And I'm not going to abuse that, but I just know that that's one of the channels that I can engage with you on.
You got it.
Yep. All right, Stephen, we are at a point in the podcast episode where I am going to do sort of a summary, a recap of what we discussed. And then I'll ask you to comment or elaborate on the summary. And then we'll get your digital contact information, and then we'll call it a wrap. So we began our conversation with a brief introduction to your company, Assurance. You are an insurance brokerage, commercial insurance brokerage, which is B2B. You've got about 6,000 clients. You said most of them are mid-sized companies, and you handle all types of insurance that companies need to run their business. You're a rookie in marketing. You've only been at it for 27 years. And you said most of it in the insurance industry. You've been on the carrier side, the third party, TPA side, right? Is that what it's called? TPA, third party?
Yep.
Administrator, right? The brokerage side. And before joining Assurance, spent 12 years, in marketing roles, but you've been at Assurance now for the past 15 or so years. You were the first person at Assurance in a marketing role. And you told the story that the CEO said, all right, Stephen, I've got this all mapped out for you. The first 5 years of your marketing role here, we're going to build the brand. And you said, hey, that's pretty much what happened. You really focused on building the brand, the best place to work, make it a top destination for brokers. And then you realized that you needed to arm the salespeople, the brokers, on equipping them to do prospecting and capture business. And so you really set out to really focus on that. And of course, that took us into the whole discussion of the way things have changed. The buyer now is the one that has all the power. They're the one that's in control. They're the ones that are doing their research online. You use the phrase, it's the dawn of LinkedIn. They're on LinkedIn. They're checking people out. And really, the whole buying cycle has kind of flipped around. Because they're doing their homework, they're further down the journey in the buying cycle. So when they do engage with a salesperson, that salesperson needs to be not just professional, that's always been the case, but a resource, credible, trustworthy, expert. And the buyer needs to perceive them that way. And so you really set about doing, things that we characterize as social selling and kind of helping your buyers really, prospects using digital and really understanding what those digital signals are so that you can really gain specific insights into what their pain points are. And then really helping your brokers become problem solvers and thought leaders and someone that can convey how well they understand your prospects' industry pain points and the solutions that you have for them. And you made the comment that, the LinkedIn profile, it starts right there. And I couldn't agree with you more. You said something that's fascinating. You said that, marketing really is sales, that you view yourself as sales, even though your title is CMO. You said you're no longer the people that make it pretty. Love that. And that you're lockstep in with the sales team. And it's really all about helping the sales team be successful. You mentioned that you take a holistic approach to helping them. That's social, that's content, and it's also being an educator. And it's taking a leadership role and helping the salespeople understand what tools they have at their disposal, how to use them. And you mentioned that they're not always wired for digital transformation. And those are my words, but that's kind of how I interpreted what you said, Stephen, that they're not always wired for that. And they may need some education. They may need to see it in action. And they really just need to understand, how to engage the modern buyer. And that modern buyer has an expectation of speed. Response times have to be faster. They have to kind of always be on. And if they're not, well, maybe a competitor might be. And so you've got to have that competitive edge by just, always being on and being very, very responsive. So I'll leave my summary there. Is there anything that you would like to add?
No, well, first, thank you for that. That was very well done. Good on you for being able to wrap all that up. The only thing I'd add probably is just the idea that marketing as it's evolved, and you sort of go back to what's changed is that marketing is very much now whereas it used to be all the creatives, real marketing, good marketing, solid marketing, is equal parts creative and data science. It has to be understanding the digital tools, the data that's out there, and how to connect the dots. And so it's been quite a journey where now we really do feel, it is my role, it's my team's role to help our salespeople go beyond what used to be thought of as, brochureware. That doesn't exist anymore. Our world is now the world of being where the buyer is and making that connection through that.
And salespeople want that data. I mean, look, I'm CMO at Vengreso, and I know our sales team, they want the data. They want to know how many prospects are available in a given market and which are the best prospects that they should go after. So I hear you loud and clear on that. And I think that's a key point that you make. And I'm glad you brought it up just before we wrapped up this episode, Stephen.
You got it.
Well, Stephen, where would you like to send my listener to connect with you online and just follow you and learn more about what you've got going on?
Given our conversation, send them to LinkedIn for one. Certainly, my LinkedIn profile is available. Stephen Handmaker, assurance, pretty easy to find, I would think. Happy to make connections that way. I also frequently tweet, if you will. So at Handmaker is my handle there, and I'm always happy to connect with folks.
Fantastic. Well, my listener knows that both will be linked up in our show notes page. And I'll just point out for my listener who might be mobile that you spell your first name, Stephen, with a V, and then Handmaker spelled the way it sounds. And again, that'll be linked up in our show notes page at vengreso.com. And Stephen, on that note, I want to just close it out and thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Thank you very much.
Get the Vengreso State of Digital Selling with LinkedIn 2019 report to learn how sales professionals stack up on basic modern selling skills. You'll hear from 15 executives with their insights and key recommendations. And you'll also learn how you can arrange to get your own custom digital selling benchmark report for your sales team. To get the report, just go to stateofdigitalselling.com.
This wraps up another inspiring episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. If you want to share this podcast with a friend, let them know that we're available on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Podcasts. And we love 5-star reviews. If you are not subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast player so you don't miss an episode. You can read the show notes for each episode at vengreso.com. While you're there, sign up to receive the show notes delivered to your inbox through our weekly alerts. And be sure to also check out our Selling with Social podcast hosted by Vengreso CEO Mario Martinez Jr. Again, you'll find our show notes at vengreso.com. And that's one S in Vengreso. Tune in again next week when Bernie Borges brings you another inspiring interview to help you thrive on your modern marketing journey.